Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, everyone. Thank you especially to Lucia and Andreas for being here. So we're gonna have a conversation tonight on power, influence, and kindness, and how they intersect. We couldn't have two people that are here to speak on it.
There are lots of people. It's had to learn through. We're at our best.
Well, and actually, I was gonna say though that this is really we'll obviously have a conversation, but it's also meant to be a discussion with everybody in here because that's what this is about. So I have a list of questions. I'm not going to read. I'm not going to ask all, but I'll start the conversation. Feel free to raise your hand, ask questions anytime, and then I'll also leave some time at the end for specifically for questions, and then we'll go till about 7:15, seeing how the conversation is flowing, and then there'll be more drinks to food available as well. Before I get started, and I'm gonna let them introduce themselves as well. And before I get started, I'm Nicole Yelsey. I'm a 2012 alumni. I'm with Scott. I'm on the Chicago Booth Alumni Board. So however you found this event, thank you to the board as well for helping to sponsor it. I'm also the co-founder of a company called KindWorks. We are a platform to help people feel better, work better, live better, all through the intentional practice of kindness. And amazingly, part of the way I connected with Lucia and Andreas is that I'm really recognizing that that is so tied with leaderships and now the work that they do, which is just really amazing. We are about 4 years old. We're starting at the workplace, but really it's for everyone. And it's a very boots tied company as well. My co-founder is also a 2016, the CEO is 2016 grad as well. So with that, I'm going to start with just having you guys introduce yourself a little bit. And in particular, you both have literally wrote best-selling books on leadership and how you think about defining leadership and what does kindness have to do with leadership.
So what you asking us? To introduce us ourselves or asking them a question?
Well, it's going to say both. Well, I think they're both a little bit tied. Your little fears. Yeah.
That's I think learning it that way. How will you start?
All right.
You're gonna have the primacy effect here.
Well, in terms of background, I am a transformation and change strategist. I do my work globally for a venture consulting firm called Korn Ferry. I'm not on the executive search side. I'm on the advisory side. So if you think about executive search, it really talents in, but advisory brings talent up. And that's all about leadership development, top of the house, middle of the house, and really emerging leadership. Within that, I also specialize in diversity and inclusion. We know that's getting decimated in a variety of ways at the surface level, but at the true essence of what D&I has been about, that doesn't change. It's really about talent optimization through and through, through every individual, every team, every manager, every team member. And so I'm still in that business, but I've been a former chief diversity officer for another global matching consulting firm. I'm a journalist by background, so I channeled my writing into half a dozen books on leadership and diversity and transformation change. And I love that space of whether it's individuals or teams, organizations. I like being in the business of helping individuals, teams, leaders, organizations get to where they want to be, especially when they're stuck where they currently are.
Okay. So the headline is I'm the president and CEO of the Center for High Performance. It's a research-based consulting firm. We've done research on the factors that accelerate profitable growth. And guess what? They're all about how people are treated. You believe what you want, but that's the differentiator in the marketplace. And it's not touchy-feely bro stuff. My research was presented at the World Economic Forum, and I'm very proud of it. I'm a do-gooder. I have a bad case of savioritis. I'm also very arrogant and pompous. I want to change the world, and it's really important to me. My mission statement is to propel leaders to greatness. I believe, like Jim Collins does, that good is the enemy of great. And I think there's a lot of good enough in the world today, a lot of mediocrity. There's a lot of mediocre cultures that people have to work in. Yeah, companies are staying alive. They're cutting or limping their way to success. But I run focus groups in 28 different countries around the world. And if I were to take all that qualitative data and put it through a piece of software that could give me a word cloud, what I have is fair. People feel they're not treated fairly. And they put everything under the fair category. I didn't get the money I deserve. Johnny got the promotion I didn't do. And somebody else gets the best projects I don't. Nobody cares what I think. It's not fair. It's not fair. It's not fair. And when people don't feel like they're being treated well, they do the minimum. They got through the day. I can tell you that most of the people I've talked to around the world get through the day doing as little as possible so they don't get caught on the next layoff. That's disgusting. I find it disgusting. I think that is the opposite of kindness. I think that's cruel. I really do. So you can tell I'm a preacher. I'm an advocate. I got a woolly pulpit. You'll hear a lot of my stuff tonight. Call me on my bullshit. You're welcome to. I'm sorry. I should have said it. Everything that's happened in my life has happened by accident. Somebody saw something in me that I didn't see. And the biggest message I want to say to the younger people in this room is when somebody sees in you something in you don't see, take advantage of it. When I graduated from graduate school, I couldn't have dreamed me. I didn't know somebody like me even existed. I didn't know that. But people saw things in me that I didn't see, including being a booth. I'm a professor here. I'm an accidental professor. I'm not one of those high mucky mucks that taught you finance. I'm not the distinguished professor of blah-de-de-blah. I didn't want to be. I didn't aspire to that. And then one day, this is a true story, and then I'll stop talking. One day, Dean Huizinga calls me up, and I get this telephone call, and I swear to God that I think it's a joke. I think one of my friends is playing with me. So I play a. And then he starts asking, he said he read my book, my second book. And then he starts asking me questions about my book. And I have this holy moment where I go, this really is Dean Huizinga of the University of Chicago. And he's talking to me. I swear to God, this really happened. And he said, could you teach your class at Booth? I'm like, what? I don't think I could have got into Booth. I didn't say that, but I did think that first thing. And, the rest is history. He said, I can't guarantee you a course, but we're a quant school. You get good scores, you can stick around. And, I got good scores. I've stuck around. I've been here 24 years. I love this school. It's the reason I'm here tonight. I'm exhausted. I want to give back. Booth Alumni I have given back to me. Booth has given me a lot. They've given me a lot of prestige. They've given me a lot of airtime. And I'm extraordinarily grateful. So that's why I'm here today.
And not just good scores, great scores. That's why, yeah. Amazing. Well, I want to go in a little bit on, you just talk to CFOs, you speak to C-suite leaders, and how do you get them to have the aha moments? I've heard you both talk about like aha moments people have had where they're like, oh, this stuff works. Inclusion, I thought that was maybe more of a flub. Like, actually, to be honest, not stuck. Or we treat people well, actually, it's going to help my bottom line. Is there anything, how do you get to that aha?
Yeah, it center on what is important to these business leaders. And, we've asked them, over time, and there's 5 things that come up: growth, profitability, innovation, talent attraction, talent optimization. And now a lot of things have been happening around talent and diversity and inclusion. And then when we ask the same question now, we say, what are your top priorities? They'll say growth, profitability, innovation, talent attraction, and talent optimization. So the aha is when, can we have a conversation about how, whether you call it kindness or you call it leadership, or you call it empathy, how is it that these very virtues and these very character traits can actually help you drive those 5 things that are really what you're being held accountable to? And that's how we lead it to the aha. And there's quantitative data that proves that. There's qualitative data that proves it. And we take them on that journey. And many times we use data from the organization itself to get to the aha, right? I mean, there's other data out there, fine, but what really makes a difference to the C-suite is tell us our story. And most of the time, those stories are in their organization. They just don't know it. And they're disconnected from the more human aspect of the business And the aha comes when we take it, it's the human aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think my job is to hold a mirror. The biggest learning I have, and because I got this bad case of savioritis, is there are very, very few bad leaders in the world, bad people in the world that are leaders. When I first started working with the C-suite, I thought, oh, gee, I'm going to take all these great people and help them to learn something else. No, it's not true. There's a lot of well-intentioned people who do bad stuff. Most leaders don't do bad stuff on purpose. That is a myth. They are clueless. Most people who do bad stuff are clueless. They don't see themselves accurately. My job is to hold a mirror, whether it's with data, whether it's through conversation. And for example, they might say, I want to get here. I said, that's great. But what you're telling me is you want to do this, this, and this. But this, and this has got you here. If you want to do this, and you want to get there, you can't keep doing this, and this. Let's look at what you got to do differently if you want to get there, because all you're going to do now is get what you want to do. I don't care. I'm going to go home. I'm going to get another client. This is your company. You want to stay here? It's your choice. You want to talk about what you can do differently, or you keep wanting to do what you've always done? I don't care, because I really don't care. My job is to get them to make good decisions about where the company's going to go and how they're going to get there. Period. That's my job. And I like Andrea. I use a lot of data to do that.
Nicole, I would add that when we assess leaders on their inclusiveness, which has elements of kindness, which is in your model as well, which is about empathy and curiosity and humility, the way we get them to really care further about their people and their humanity is not only through the data, but helping connect with them as the humans that they are. So when you get them talking about their story, their identity, their upbringing, their aspirations, their ambitions, their failures, the things that they want to achieve, and you speak to them not as this CFO or COO, but as the human being that they are, it moves them, it touches them, and we say that you're feeling, you have the power to create that in your workforce, not only on a one-on-one basis, but also at a scalable basis. That's what we talk about.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then it's up to them also to permeate that through their organization. So that feeling and that ownership, not just for them, but for everyone. As with that too, those five, no matter what you say, here's five, the growth and, talent optimization and everything. Often the KPIs that and the performance metrics are tied to those five and not necessarily to the underlying how. Have you seen any cases of people successfully embedding these practices into KPIs and performance metrics or other ways to make it part of their culture in a really tangible way? Otherwise, it becomes easy, I think, to be like, you're in the moment with you. Yes. And then, but I have my KPIs over here.
Okay, so there's a company in Silicon Valley. Any company I use the name of, I have permission. They're called NetApp. They started about 30 years ago with 5 people. They're called 5 horsemen of NetApp. Any of you familiar with NetApp? I like them because I call them the little engine you could. Anytime the market shifts, they're a technology play. They go down, they keep struggling, they get back up, and they get back up harder. And I haven't followed them in a few years, so this may not still be true. The 5 horsemen is starting to become retired, and since they've retired, I'm not really I don't really own the company anymore. One of their goals was, as these 5 humans, was they wanted to create a company where people like them fit in. They were the people, I call them younger voice, people that nobody listened to, but they saw the future. And they didn't want to create that kind of company. They wanted to do something special, and they wanted to just do. So fast forward, they're now a successful company. And they decided that they wanted to be one of the best companies in America to work for. It was part of their KPIs. It was a deeply held goal that you got measured and performed against and paid for, whether or not. And it was a shared goal, which I think is really important. It was a shared goal by the leadership team. And I remember watching Dan Warmmelman at the Fortune. No, they became one of, I forget how many years ago, Fortune's best company to work for. And when you're the CEO of that company, you speak to an audience and you tell your story. And he looked around the room and he said, look around this room. There's a whole lot of HR people. Give it up. You're not going to make it. He said, if the senior leadership team of the organization doesn't have skin in the game and they don't own the goal and it's not part of what drives their success, you're never going to be one of the best Cummings America. And I thought that was the best advice I ever heard anybody give. And it wasn't for me, but it's absolutely true. So is that an example of what you're talking about? Very much, yeah.
Yeah, the example that comes to mind is, and I also have their permission to mention them, and they've been quite a bit in the media, Barilla Pasta, headquartered in Parma, Italy. And yeah, so over 10 years ago, they're one of their, the chair of the Barilla family, Barilla, was on a local radio station. And he said, made a hell of a boycott. And it was bad. The prompt was about, gay families and their products. And then, he talked about how they made pasta for traditional families. And that's not in their market. Well, that little local radio interview went viral around the world. And it triggered a worldwide boycott of their products. So they called us for help. And they said, look, we have an element dealing with the PR part. We're calling you Korn Ferry because if we got it wrong on the gay issue, we're getting it wrong in other things of our culture. If we missed it there, we're missing elsewhere. And we want to find out why we missed it, how we missed it, and how we hope it's again.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So,
That's really impressive.
and we actually went in, and they have, factories in Sweden, in Russia, in Turkey, out in Brazil, the United States, obviously in Italy, Greece. So very international, very global, very diverse. And we went in and we did focus groups and we did surveys and we talked to the top executives and then the managers and then the different affinity groups. And we did a very robust amount of data collection, analysis, root cause, and we presented a role. And I have to say that, yes, he made the awful statement, rooted in a belief. But he realized two things as a business person and as a human being. As a business person, he saw the business impact. But as a human being, he saw the damage and he took it to heart. And so that was top of the house. He went through a personal transformation. He reached out to LGBTQ activists here in the U.S. and asked her to be, just his more personal counsel on this particular issue. But he didn't just narrow it to that issue. He made it about all forms of diversity. And our findings were about, the prisons were very apps. And here's some assets in the organization where things are going well. Here that I capitalized. So if you get to results, it's that there was some broken things in the culture. It was too top down. It was too paternalistic. It was too hierarchical. The family was too primary, and a lot of voices were being stifled. And a lot of the diversity of the organization was not realized and noticed until we started to have a lot of diversity they didn't even know they had. And they started a culture shift that was very transformative, and they took it to heart. They held themselves accountable. They went through inclusive leader training, and they started looking at their values and seeing where some values were still good and have served it well, and others were outdated or they had to put other values in it, especially inclusion. And here's the results. Here's what are the metrics? Well, the reputational metrics, there's business metrics, there's talent impacting engagement metrics. And on all of them, they broke through the barriers, right? They just righted the ship on the erosion on their reputation, because they started to be not only fixing don't say that, to be very proactive about reaching out to the LGBT community in marketing and within their talent pool. So much so that they went from being in the doghouse on this issue, boycott, to within 18 months later, they had 100% in the Human Rights Corporate Quality Index, which measures LGBTQ inclusion. That's something we want. And then 8 years later, they got, the Catalyst Awards, the Catalyst Award to 2 companies worldwide. So it's very prestigious, very hard to accomplish, a lot of competition. And, 5, 6, 7 years into their journey, they were one of the companies awarded that. And that's just low. So that's measurable reputation recognition. But they became more diverse. They got more, especially with women, more women in leadership. They started being very proactive in developing the pipeline. And it was big. And I'll wrap up with this part. We worked with them for 10 years, and then they need us, which is good. And then they had us come back about 3 years later, say, can you do a 10-year retrospective? Because we were their engagement survey provider post that intervention. And so we had the longitudinal data that we had never done. We had done a year-over-year comparison, but they asked us to go back 10 years. And that was really powerful for us because we could see the shift organizationally and culture, and we could see that things still had not changed, right? And so they took that to heart, and that became the basis for their strategic plan for the next decade.
That's a key story. That's amazing story. According to how they got that index and the catalyst. One of my students of last week is in the room. Laura, I said hello to her, and I'm very self-conscious of the fact that I tell the same stories, and she's going to hear hell over them. But still bear with me. Thank you. And one of my very first students is in the audience today. And I don't remember a lot of my students, but I do remember them. Thank you all for coming, by the way. You should have started, but thank you. Hey, get right into a serious question, like forgot.
And I was gonna open it up too. I do have one other because I wrote down here self-reflection as being really important to the CEO, and then also doing that for the company, which was really amazing that they did that, and also like authenticity. So it wasn't performative of like we're gonna go out there to say something. It was like truly authentic because of self-reflection, and I think that tied very much into how you guys think about the importance that leaders have to do. Can you talk about that role of self-reflection and what we are?
Well, I said a little bit. I'm going to reframe your question in a way that I think is apropos to his question, is what he just said. And that's that the true test of a leader is not what they do right. That's not the true test of a leader. True test of a leader is when you blow it. What do you learn from? How do you react? And do you do something differently as a result? That's the true test. It's easy to be a good leader in good times. It's easy to be a good leader when there's on a headline about you in the paper or something goes viral. That's easy. It's difficult when you got pressure, when your emotions are involved, when you're embarrassed. Then it becomes much more difficult. That's really hard. And what's impressive about their story is that they learned from it. They changed. They grew. They thought about it. Now, when I was younger and had a worse case of saviouritis than I do now, I used to care if people did the right thing because they did the right thing. Now I don't care. If I can influence somebody to do the right thing for the wrong reasons, and they do the right thing, I consider that a win. I consider it a grand slam home run if they do the right thing for the right reasons. That's why I love the story. They did the right thing for the right reasons, and they made more money. Right? It's fantastic.
Yeah, I would say that, thinking through what's been happening in the diversity, equity, inclusion world, which is what I've been spent, the last couple of decades in, it's like, what is at the core of what was behind that work? And it was really being able to see every individual in the organization and really living out the true measure of the belief in meritocracy, that everybody in your organization should be able to rise post potential, and identifying the barriers that might get in the way that are not only individual, but are my hang-ups or my lack of skills, that also could be collective. What is it about sociologically that could work, create headwinds for certain population groups to advance in the organization? So in this decimation, my conversations in the C-suite with leaders, and I've always had the conversation about authenticity, but now it's more urgent than ever, because when I think about in an era of shamelessness, which was what we're in right now, is, what is the response? And I think the response is character, to be leaders of character. And what are some of those characteristics of character, right? And, I've been really wrestling with that. And there's a lot of, we can have a great conversation about what would you add to the list, but there's 7 that come up it's authenticity, purpose, kindness, courage, resilience, humility, and gratitude. And I think that leaders in this time where there's a lot of pain and a lot of confusion and a lot of swirl and a lot of unkindness, right? That leaders that could step into the breach with those qualities is a breath of fresh air, but also it leads to better leadership. And why is that? Because if the world is feeling out of control and it's spinning and it's sort of out of balance right now, there's a lot of things that leaders and any one of us can't control because they're big, major forces. What is it that we can control? What we can control is our center. If things are off center in the world and I'm feeling off center, but I can't control that off centeredness, but I can control this. How do I get centered? And how do I get centered? It begins with understanding who am I? And that's authenticity. And the second thing is, and what am I about? And that's purpose. And that's really in my work, the core of my work is like, who are you and what are you about? If you can get centered in that and then answer the same questions for your company, what is your organization? What's it about? And what's the purpose? Then whatever dilemmas, paradoxes, swirl, confusion, disruption that comes your way, okay, you got to go through the storms. At least you have your true north that will keep you focused on that. And I think that those are key qualities for this time.
Absolutely. That's true north both for you as a leader and for the organization, and finding that intersection. That not only helps you feel better, but then it helps work and actually sits in that.
Yeah, and the metaphor is simple, right? If for anybody that's been on a ship in the storm, the worst thing a captain can be in is not knowing where they're headed, right? But if they know where they're headed, no matter where the waves are coming from or the wind is battering them, they can make right adjustments to stay the course, even as they have to swirl and tack it each way.
I want you to notice something about the way you talk. You probably picked it up already. Everybody that does the kind of work you do has a language, a way they say things. But basically, that language is saying the same thing. And so that means there's some universal truths. And I think it's an important in a company, and I think why his initiative worked, for example, is he has a particular language, a way he phrases things. And so when a company hires you and you pick some group that's got a language, that language is universally held in a corporation. And you can shortcut things. You can say things like North Star. And if you work with them, you don't have to explain it like you did here. Everybody knows what it means. And that's really makes the flow of change easier when people speak the same language. I did a consulting assignment once where it was a very siloed organization, and the HR department was siloed. And they wrote the same thing. They wrote how you reward compensation, how you've hired people, what were the tiers. And they all said the same things. They just used different words. And it was really, really confusing in the organization. And instead of driving the performance they wanted it to do, people didn't get it. Now, certainly there are people who see across things, and people who see across things got it. But there are a lot of people who see down. And when they saw down, they didn't see it. So I think it's really important to notice that we don't say the same things. We have different stories, different language, but it's all the same stuff. It's just wrapped.
And I would add something that I know you practice is the language, the terminology, yes, whether it's your values or the, expected behavior, but there's a lot of organizations that have the same words and they put them as posters, sales, live it out. And that's where it becomes really like a formative thing. And so having the right work from same words or framework is vital. But then you have to understand what are the expected behaviors to live up to those words and then be held accountable. So going back to metrics, some of the KPIs have to do with not only did you achieve your campus objectives, but how did you treat people along the way? Do you have a high attrition on it, or you have high disengagement on your team, right? Even so, in companies that value values, who care not only about the financials, they care about the impact on people and customers.
Yeah. I think that's a really great point, is how many people had probably work somewhere where their values are up on the wall, but then you don't feel it in the everyday. But also part of that is defining the behaviors that go with the values, because that might mean something different for somebody versus someone else. And so someone might feel it and the other person does it. So aligning that language, I think.
It's important to write it down. Your values are very simple. They're the behaviors lived in the organization. If they match the words, then you're a value-driven organization. If they don't, you're not. And in business, your values where your mouth is. Do you do a deal that doesn't give you values because you're going to make a whole lot of cash? If you do, you're not a value-driven organization. Same thing. It's easy to be value-driven when nothing's at stake. But when something's at stake, you're going to lose money. I mean, how many companies today try to cover stuff up? I mean, that's not a value-driven organization. First of all, it's stupid. You're going to get caught. We live in an open communication society. Think about all the crises. They always get caught. So what's the point anyway if you're not value-driven? But if you are value-driven and one of your values is integrity, how do you cover things up? Because you're afraid of losing money. I'm sorry again, but one of my big things is that leadership courage is in short supply in the world today. And it saddens me like nothing else. Leadership courage is putting your money where your mouth is. Are you willing to put your principles over your profits? And as a leader, are you willing to put your values over your ambition? Because that's being value-driven in the world of business. And who you are at home and who you are at work and who you are with your kids, you're the same. And you can pretend that you can make decisions at work and you're somebody else, but you show. And don't fool yourself. You show. Your kids know.
We've got to ask questions.
Yeah, I was at
Of course.
So it's interesting because there's actually been examples of companies that try to do the right thing and it's blown up in the face. I think Budweiser, they was one of those companies. They were running ads promoting diversity, Lucia, and their sales starting to tank, especially in more conservative parts of the U.S. But do you feel that is something? And I don't know what they did. If they just started pulling those commercials, or is it your advice then being, look, you just have to power through. Over time, things will turn around.
You know, the most classic example, and it's sad because it's so old, is time. You know, somebody died, taking it. I don't remember the details. I think it was arsenic. They took all Tylenol off the shelves everywhere in the world because if there was a risk, anybody was going to die, whether it was a fluke or not. They did it. They lost a whole lot of money, and they gained it all back, and they got great reputation. And it wasn't a hard choice for them because they knew their values and had behavioralized them and had a crisis communication plan in place before the crisis happened. And they were willing to lose it because it wasn't worth it over one day. Now, whether you should make that decision or not, I'm not so pompous as to tell you how to run your company. What I am saying, yeah, if you live your values, you may lose money. You may have a dip. That stuff can happen. If you don't lose your money, there's a risk both ways. If you don't live your values, you may lose money, and you may crash and burn. And we had so many stories. Could we go around and talk about all the non-value driven? Oh, come on. Selling loans to people that you know can't afford it, but you can give your loan to somebody else. That certainly crashed and burned. Credit default swaps. Okay, come on. Did that crash and burn? Did they make a ton of, the banks make a ton of cash over credit default swaps? My favorite Jamie Dimon story is he goes to, he's feisty. If you saw his leaked video recently, his leaked audio, he's a really crusty, feisty guy. One of the most successful CEOs ever. He bought JP Morgan. JP Morgan invented the credit default swap. And all banks are making money except his. So he's mad, right? He gets on a plane, he goes to London, talks to him, and he wants to know what's going on. And they told him that there are 3 levels of risk. Last one was that the real estate market had crashed. They couldn't figure out a way to mitigate around that risk. Their operating assumption was that other people were smarter than them and they just went ahead and did it. No, they didn't figure out a way to mitigate against that risk. JB listened, and he's alive to tell the story. So, yeah, did they make a ton of cash by not being value by? Sure. How many of those companies don't exist today? There's a risk of there's always a risk. You cannot make a risk-free decision in business. If you do it one way, there's a risk. If you do it another way, there's a risk. What risk do you have tolerance for? It's always two sides to every coin.
And I would add to the particular example you gave, and there's many like that, the difference in some of those actions that are about diversity and inclusion is whether they truly believed in the value of inclusion. So there was a lot of organizations just doing it, just to showcase or to just jump on the bandwagon, but they hadn't done the work. Right. So, yes, exactly. And they hadn't done the work of, well, why is this important? Why is it important for us as an employer? Why is it important for us as a business? Right. It just seemed like a good, fun thing to do and very popular until it wasn't. And the companies that folded are the ones that really did not do it because it's part of the values. They were just trying to take advantage of something that was popular at the time. And there's other companies that really stuck to their values. Costco is a great example of that. And they have talked about diversity and inclusion for the longest time. It's reflected in the workforce. They understand that diversity of the workforce is what they need to reach the diversity of the marketplace, and that they depend on the diversity of the workforce to help them see the kinds of products that they need in their Costco stores so that they can go to the broad, diverse marketplace. And when all the executive orders came, Costco was one of the few companies that publicly say, we're not backing down. And under a huge amount of pressure, not only from the White House, but from social media. But the difference between Anheuser-Busch and Costco is that Costco believed in inclusion, and it was the true north. And when the battering came, they held it round. And Anheuser-Busch did not really believe it enough. And that's really wrong.
Those are the book, Last Call for Good Life. You might be interested. I worked for Anheuser-Busch for 2011 to 2014. And I was going to say very similar. It goes to authenticity and how they're doing that, and not performative to hit the boxes on investor reports and getting the Cannes Lion because they didn't do it authentically.
Leaders are made over decades. And you mentioned about authenticity and purpose. Does authenticity and purpose shape into being kindness? How is kindness created in leaders? Unless you are kind to begin with, and I believe sometimes kindness is a proxy for weakness.
I guess it all depends on definition. Every word can have several different meanings. When my kids were growing up, I used to say to them, it's important to be nice. You gotta be nice people. You gotta say please, you gotta say thank you. We got to give to people like yours by people if you like it they like. If you're invited to some kind of church service, whether it's synagogue, whether it's Christian, you don't just go to the party. You gotta go to service. That's being nice. Even if you're bored for 2 hours. Friends being Bob Nitzwit, you gotta listen to the Torah, you gotta listen to their interpretation of it. That's it. Okay? That's the way it is. But in life, sometimes you have to be kind. Kind is harder to me. Kind sometimes is telling somebody something they don't want to hear. Kind is doing something that's difficult for you. Kind is understanding that somebody's had a rough day, and even though you're busy, that it is an inconvenience to you, and you don't really want to do it, that maybe your job is to make their day. And kindness is hard. Niceness is easy. It's hard to be kind. And why is it a business imperative? Because when you give feedback to people, for example, when you don't tell them something they don't want to hear, they're not going to do their best work. When people are down and you don't notice it and you don't do something, they're going to be filled, they're going to be in their livid brain where they don't do their best thinking and they're filled with negative energy and they're slower and they don't have the chemicals inside your body to do their best work. It's not about touchy-feely growth stuff. It's about the fact that there's all kinds of research that supports how people are treated. You'll make more money and drive innovation. It's just a fact. You can deny that fact if you want, but I can give you loads of data to support that conclusion. And the goal here is every bit of research about it.
Moses, I only have one of these, but we have a whole white paper on kindness in the power skill era, and a lot of the data behind it. But in 2021, when Danielle came to me with this idea for KindWorks, I started diving into the research on kindness. I had this aha moment. I'm like, this is what I've been preaching my whole career, not necessarily calling it kindness, but it's the kind of the human. Like, we're all humans, including at the workplace. Doesn't mean not having hard conversations. Like, I've let multiple people go at a company called KindWorks based in kindness. It's hard conversations. And you do it with humanity. Like, I am here is like, this is, I've helped, like, I have wonderful relationships. And then that also, like, we're all humans. That's the bottom line. And people are more loyal. They're working harder. Like, they're ultimately driving stronger business results when you treat each other like humans at the workplace and not at the workplace.
We talk in a very affirmative way about creating spaces with psychological safety. Like, kindness plays a key role in that, right? In that, what allows people to take the risks that innovation requires. Because how am I going to challenge the status quo or come up with that sort of off the wall idea that could be the beginning of a really disruptive response to an opportunity if I don't feel psychologically safe in the company or my teammates or my boss, right? So and kindness is the kind of thing that creates that sense of, I can be myself, right? They see me, they care about me, and therefore in the moment of doing the work together, I'm going to go for it, right? And that is what leads to great recognition. And there's a loose end in behind your question. Well, I don't think we're implying that authenticity and purpose is enough. It's the beginning. Because we can think of leaders today that are very authentic and purposeful and very destructive. Right? So you got to look at kindness and you got to look at humility. You like to look at curiosity and gratitude to be a kind of more well-rounded, kind leader that really elicits that kind of responses over time.
One of the most tangible stories I tell when everyone's great in Anheuser-Busch. So I came in 2011, soon after the 3G takeover, and they brought in all these, MBAs and fresh out of Stanford and Harvard and Boots and all these other places. And we were mostly on the brand team and on the finance team. And then there was the sales team and, the legal team and all these other teams that had been there for 20 plus years. All of their friends had been let go. And it was, not a great culture work environment. There was very much a us versus that. And one of the brand managers at one of the point in time asked me, how do you get the sales team to do anything for you? And I'm like, well, I spend a lot of time on the 6th floor. We sit on the 9th floor and I know them all. And I go to baseball games with them. And I've just got to know them as people. And when I have needs, do them in person and they're at their desk. And that was one of those aha moments of you just treat people like people, then your job gets easier. And I enjoyed it more. So. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
So how can CXOs go to the kind leader and they continuously barrage for their numbers, quarterly numbers, DPS, investors, even non-public companies, they're always barraged for numbers to comps. Even if they want to be, sometimes they can upload everything, right? And so on. So what do you think is the new up?
I think you're expressing what I said earlier. Companies make lots of short-term decisions. You can cut your way to success. You can shortcut your way to success. You can forget about people, your way to success will last. Will last. And you have to decide as a leader in a company, are you working for a company that's going to last? And it doesn't matter to you. That's your decision. It's not mine. But will it last? Is it sustainable? And lasting can mean that you could become Microsoft before Satya Nadella. You can have a commodity product that's going to be on the marketplace that only requires marginal change each year, innovation by changing the same thing and making it better. Or you can become a great company that does special things. Microsoft had that tipping point. They were commoditized. And then they decided to do stuff differently. If you read the book Refresh, it was all about the culture change. It was all about stopping to be a know-it-all and be a learn-it-all and understand people. And Satya Nadella believes that empathy is not optional, that you cannot be an innovative company if you're not empathic. If you can't put yourself in the shoe and make the unmet needs of the customer, then how are you going to innovate? Innovation is nothing but meeting unmet needs. And that requires empathy. It just does. It's one of those is's.
I would also say ask, why do you feel like you can't practice kindness? Like all the things that you said of constantly getting him for numbers and there's pressure that's for a CFO and many other jobs. Like, what is it underlying that? That itself is not the reason to not be able to be kind. Again, it doesn't mean not having hard conversations. If, delivering numbers that maybe aren't great, but doing it with humanity and finding the human connection. Whoever is on the other side is also a human. I say that and there's AI, obviously. Yes.
But behind the question, and I know you're channeling what a lot of businesses say.
You just talk to both for
Yep.
yeah.
There's a presumption that it's a either or. You can be a tough, numbers-driven CFO doing your job. It doesn't mean that you can't be kind, right? And I think, but CFOs and other leaders kind of fall into that trap. Like, I don't have time to be kind. Right? I am to drive the numbers and be accountable. It's like, well, we can talk about many leaders who, are tough leaders, effective leaders, transformational leaders, hard, edge, and also kind. And so I think we need to challenge that it's a dichotomy, that's a polarized either or. I think it would be well picked.
As a CFO, this is why it's opening line in my classes. Your job as a CFO is to tell the emperor they have no clothes. You're the keeper of the purse. Money talks in any organization. You got to be able to tell truth to power. If you don't have the guts, the courage to tell truth to power, and you're not kind enough to tell somebody what they don't want to hear, the person who runs your company, you're not an effective CEO. As a leader, you have an obligation, a fiduciary obligation to your organization to do the right thing. And when you allow your company to do things to people that are going to decrease productivity, decrease morale, not allow innovation, are you meeting your fiduciary responsibility to shareholders? This isn't about being nice for the sake of being nice. Sure, like I said, do I like people to do the right thing because it's the right thing? Yeah, but often the right thing is the fiscally responsible thing to do. They're not mutually exclusive. If you believe they're mutually exclusive, we can go home. Seriously, if you can't look at the world and see the shape we're in and see what's happening and believe being totally numbers driven and that that we need to create cultures of divisiveness and power and competition and then that works, I can't change that people help me. I'm a first class noticer. I see patterns. I look at trends and patterns. And the trends and patterns are going in the wrong direction. One of the things I'm proud of in the class that Laura was in, we get people from all over the world. We mix them up in peer coaching groups. And one of their big takeaways is that people are people all over the world. They all have the same challenges. It doesn't matter what kind of clothes they wear. It doesn't matter what the color of their skin is. It doesn't matter what the cultural norms are. Basic human need is basic human need around the world. And we can bond as people and see what makes us human and bond together and do great things. Or we can see what divides us and we can encourage hatred. That's choice. Me, I'm on the side of unity. That's the side because I think it's better.
Let's say you're not CEO. What is your role if you're like in a smaller environment in a large company? How do you try to do those things in your life?
You're only in control of the environment you lead and manage. Okay? You may have influence over or other parts of the organization, and your job is to try to influence. Your job is not to do and waste your time and your energy and your anything on things that are out of your control. What is in your control and what is totally in control is the environment you lead and manage. Now, if your environment is being destroyed by the environment surrounded, and then you've got a personal choice to make. Can I do my best work in this environment? Can I influence it? Is there anything I can do to make the organization better? And if there's not, and you're having a good time in your environment, and for whatever reasons you need to stay there, they're personal, that's okay. Just make that choice. Just don't blame other people for it. You have a right to make whatever choices you want. Just don't blame other people because then you become part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Yeah, another example. I'll go back to Barilla. This is 15 years later after the story I told you, where they have a first-time manager for a factory in southern Italy. It's female, and she was the result of pipeline development. They sent her around the world. It's a supply chain, and she was the first one. And not only she was female in southern Italy, which is very conservative, but she was from northern Italy, so she was fair-skinned. She was female, unmarried, was then added another thing I mentioned. She was Gen X, was added another dimension, and she had visible tattoos. But Barilla stood behind her, knowing all that about her and knowing exactly what southern Italy culture would be about. And she had choices to make as a leader. She understood what she was going to be facing. And she did what inclusive leaders do. She really, to your example, right? Your personal example. The first thing she did before she dictated anything or suggested anything was to get to know the people of the factory. And she made the rounds, and she made the rounds, and got to know what's important to you, what could we do better. She got to know about their families. And little by little, if the very person, right, her name's Madame Magadi, when she showed up to the Chamber of Commerce meeting when she first came, they had announced that Barilla factory had a new director for the factory, and everybody's looking for Mr. Malgadi. And she said, "I'm Malgadi." He says, "Yeah, but we're looking for your husband." So he goes, "No, I am Darif." That's where she started. And then 4 years in, not only is she respected and she's admired, but she has activated a lot of inclusive teams, and their results in terms of production and breakdowns and safety are better than what first arrived. But so to your question, what does it take? It doesn't matter if it's a factory or if it's a team of 7 people or if it's a divisional unit of 1,000. Every leader has the opportunity to influence their sphere. Thank you.
I think the other thing I would add to that is anyone at it doesn't matter how big the team is or what level or any of that. One thing I believe that is a core piece of kindness is assuming positive intent until proven otherwise. But most people are coming with positive intent. And it's really easy to come assuming negative intent, especially when you get an email that feels harsh or a Slack message that feels harsh. But if you assume positive intent, chances are that other person was just stressed or rushed, getting demanded for numbers and just said something that felt offensive, but it was coming from positive intent. And if you start there, chances are you dilute this situation and then form a better relationship. It's like, that is how I formed a lot of relationships.
And now, but add to team behaviors, there's big behaviors about kindness that require a big, heavy lift, but it's the micro behaviors. When you just notice that somebody's having a hard day, say, hey, you look tired, and I don't mean it in a negative way, but is there something that you can, that I can help you with? And just the fact that you noticed, that's an act of kindness. You go a very deep way, not only because you noticed that the person feels seen, but now you open up an opportunity for them to tell you, well, actually, I'm struggling with X. And it gives you an opportunity to then do something about it. But if you don't demonstrate the kindness, that person doesn't get the kindness and touch, but they also likely don't get the actual practical thing they need because you would have not opened the doors to see what it is that they.
So, happy at that, I actually just wanted to be on the like we had no running work out already, and we had just not kind of level of people in Nigerian, and I believe it's very important. Like your point is building the relationship with your people. I try to know them and the personal love of you. So, for example, I have this guy, and he's in the for 35 years, and his wife has had a cancer. Yeah, and many countries take your like I could have found it next to me as like whoever. Without me, like you just mentioned that I'm like, you don't have me to problem. You send message go from this. A little bit I seen my brothers crossing or like I make on all the concerts and I asked his son she want to and they listen to him like active with us. Like try to build that back of the activist normality if they walk ways, but people can't feel that and you feel there's an humanity in you that you really care about them and they will go the extra mile for you. Absolutely, you made them that level of times.
People work for people. It's just it, and if somebody feels that you have their best interest in art, then they're going to work a lot harder for you. I mean, you're that person's boss. And the fact that you start you might think this is sick, but if you're 3 levels ahead of somebody in an organization and you stop by and ask them how they are, you don't think you're important. They think you're really important. You got some fancy title and you just go talk to them, just say hello, ask them some personal questions. You made that person stay. When you say thank you to somebody and you say it the genuine way, and you don't just say thank you, you just say, hey, here's what you did. Here's why it worked. It really helped us reach our goals because it takes a minute instead of a second. That really makes an impression on somebody. That's saying those behaviors I did, I worked my tail off, they mattered. And that motivates people to do their best work.
It's also the kindness is contagious is not just a saying. There's science behind it because then that feeling spreads. But also when you do that, you actually are gonna. It's the oxytocin. You're gonna be more motivated, and ultimately you're going to see like, oh, I am able to do my job better because I am feeling better, and it is truly a cycle that science proves.
Behaviors start at the top of any organization. They trickle down.
And we do one more question, and then yeah.
I'll say good words.
No, that's good. Last.
Thank you, Anders. As you all the voice made, which is saying all the next daily workforce strength, their personal self, so their desires, their values, and patience. But then, do you see that they're derisive in too much self empowerment, or do you allow that? And your workforce isn't aligned demand over the implementation. How do you see that? Yeah, actually, the phrase "bring your whole self to work" and it has sort of a shadow side to it, and I think you're alluding to it. I mean, we are very complex people, all of us, and we have many dimensions to us, and we operate in arenas. And the work arena, the work arena is not going to be the canvas or the environment in which I can fully express the multidimensionality of who I am. You're looking for the Venn diagram intersection between what organizational purpose and personal purpose, but it's not going to be all my purposes, right? And so I want to bring my best self that overlaps with what the organization needs. And that's why, and maybe that's why there's often confusion about kindness being this soft thing and say, well, but we have business to do. We have product to sell. We have innovation to do. And we say, yeah, that doesn't change. Be clear about your purpose. Be clear about your values. Be clear about your expectation. Be clear about the accountabilities. And then hire and attract and develop and reward the people that sort of are with that program. But do it in a way that is clear, compassionate, and enabling. And in that stream, create a space so people would bring their best selves, right? Their best work because they feel seen and valued and respected. And I'm going to give you the best that you need for this context, which we are together.
And it's not kind. It is the opposite of kindness. To ask somebody what their best and highest usage is, and for them to become self-aware and know what they truly love, and your company can't offer it, that's not kind. That's not good to your company, and it's certainly cruel to the person. You're never going to grow in a company that doesn't value what they do or need what they do. That is the opposite of kindness. That's cruelty. And that's about you. That isn't about the other person. When you allow something like that to happen, it's because you don't want to do a tough thing. That has nothing to do with the other person. You don't want to tell somebody the truth. You don't want to help them fulfill themselves. It's because it makes you want comfort. Just think about that. It's not about them. It's about you. And as a leader, it's about them and the company, not about you.
The kind thing is sometimes having the hard conversation and also be kind to the company itself, but to be aligned with the values as well. So the amazing conversation. Thank you. Thank you all. Let's just sit around for a little bit. Questions. I'll be here as well. There's food and drinks outside. So help yourself.